Welcome to Fashionista Activista, the podcast where style meets activism. I'm your host, Diana Diaz, and in each episode, we'll dive deep into the inspiring journeys of women business owners in Los Angeles, with a special spotlight on women of color. Join us as we celebrate the power, diversity, and creativity of underrepresented Latin women, youth, and queer communities through their captivating conversations and high-quality content. Welcome again to the Goddess Mercado Fashionista Activista Podcast, brought to you by Kaiser Permanente, New Economics for Women, and SoCal Gas. Thank you all for supporting the sharing of our stories. We have a very special guest today that I admire and love, Luis Cornejo, who is a licensed marriage and family therapist, also a sex therapist, works with the LGBTQ community, BIPOC communities, has several businesses and brands that we're going to talk about and explore and promote here on our channel. Welcome back.
Thank you.
Welcome back, because Luis is also hosting one of our Queer Mercado podcast episodes. Thank you so much for joining us.
Of course.
How have you been?
To be here. I've been good. Busy, life, trying to find a harmony with everything that I'm doing, but it's been going pretty good.
That's tough. I can get that. There's some of our vendors in the Goddess Mercado that don't know you very well.
Yeah.
So I'm going to ask you to briefly share your upbringing and what it was like for you to grow up in Guatemalan American family.
Yeah, so I am first generation. My mom is from Guatemala City, and my dad is from Morelia, Michoacan. And I was raised predominantly from the Guatemalan culture. I didn't grow up knowing a lot of my Mexican side, the culture, or any of that. It was mostly the Guatemalan side. And so I was raised with my grandparents and aunts and uncles, all from Guatemala. We used to go to Guatemala, I think, at least once every couple of years as soon as my parents got their citizenship. And so it was a big part of my life. So culturally, I am Guatemalan. But so right now I've been kind of spending the last maybe 4 or 5 years learning a lot more about my Mexican side, including my abuela, who I never met, my dad's mom, who was from Oaxaca and was indigenous. And there were like little, stories that they share, but I think it's usually hard for our parents to talk about a lot of these experiences because there's so much trauma, but also a lot of wounds that oftentimes they haven't really processed or gone through themselves. And so they share very small things, like they'll tell me, oh yeah, she was from Oaxaca, she spoke a different language, they didn't know anything about her family, anything like that. And so I think for many of us who are first generation, we kind of spend a bit of time trying to not just reconnect, but also really trace back some of these roots. And that's really hard.
It's important to us, right?
It is very important to us. I think that it speaks volumes to how we have survived as a community, but also how our culture has really impacted who we are as people. And so I think that's why so many of us try to really reconnect, right? Whether it is going back to a country that we weren't born or raised, but we just know so much about, or whether it is trying to implement it into our identity through fashion, through our businesses, all of that. So I think it's just a very crucial part of how we form our identity.
You used a word right now that is very important to me. You said fashion.
To both of us.
Yeah, and I'm a school counselor, and you're a therapist, but I see how important fashion is for mental health, for visibility, for making a statement, for a variety of reasons. Mm-hmm. And one thing that attracted me to you is, when I saw you on social media, that's when I was like, I gotta know this person. But I reached out because you were so fabulous.
Thank you.
The outfits you were so eccentric, so loud, so proud, and you were very much owning both your masculinity and your femininity. I want to know, take us through that process. When did it start? How old were you?
This was something that was always a part of my life. I can remember as far back as maybe being 5, 6, 7 years old, playing with my primas, because I had mostly primas, I didn't have a lot of primos. And so they would play with their dolls. And I remember me coming over and getting so excited to make clothes for them. And so we would use toilet paper, we would use old shirts, we would use like all of this fabric.
You're like, step away, girls, let me.
And they would want me to. They'd be like, "Oh my gosh, can you make my doll a princess dress, or can you make her a gown?" And I would be sitting there wrapping toilet paper, tying it with all these types of things. And it was almost like a secret because I knew even then when I was a kid that if my parents saw me or my uncle saw me or my aunts, that they wouldn't be okay with it because we had been told constantly what is for boys, what is for girls. And so all the gender norms that were taught to us, I mean, they were pretty dominant, especially in my family because they were very religious, and also because the culture was so strong that there were almost these like expectations of what was appropriate and what wasn't appropriate. And so a lot of it I did in secret.
So you did it in secret. When did you start becoming this fabulous fashionista in front of your family?
You know, in front of my family, it took years. I'm going to say it's probably been the last 4 years at this point. But like I said, you know, for me, it did start earlier and they knew. So it wasn't.
You started with your pinky, you painted your pinky nail?
Well, you know, that's the funny thing that it was not something that I hid because I didn't understand it. And so to me, it was very normal, very natural to want to be creative, to be drawn to things that were beautiful, to want to express in this way. So a lot of times it wasn't that I was actively telling my family, is that they saw it. And so there was a lot of pushback.
What did they tell you? How did they push?
That's not for boys. You shouldn't like that. You don't do that. What are people going to say? You know, that's only for girls. Like, you can't like that color. Like, a lot of like rules, a lot of no's, and also a lot of self-doubt that was kind of instilled in me, because I think at that point I started to think, well, if I can't do these things, that I need to be what they're telling me, which is be more masculine. And so I spent a lot of time trying to fit in with other boys. I spent a lot of time trying to dress, do my hair, look like them. And yet I was never accepted, even when I did that. You know, I went through a lot of bullying in middle school, which was usually for most people, one of the hardest like sequences right in our life as children is middle school, because we're still trying to figure out who we are. We're barely starting to make social connections with people. We're starting to be more aware of a lot of things, and bullying is a lot more popular.
And your hormones are going crazy.
Yeah, your hormones are starting to like go wild. I mean, there's a lot going on. And so for me, I remember that those 3 years were the hardest years of my childhood because there was so much confusion. And I remember like even like at night crying, like praying to God, like saying, God, please just make me normal. Let me wake up and let me be normal. And that was something that I held on to so much, was this desire to want to be normal, because I knew that everything that I was not aligned with what I was being told. And so even from there, I that's why I was kind of sharing going back, because I think the last 4 years have been more of me embracing it, but it's always been there. It's been, you know, it's been shining. It's been wanting to come out. And
not like you're doing it lately, because
yeah, you know, and I think it took time. It took a lot of healing. It took a lot of boundaries and limits. It took a lot of crying, a lot of moments of empowerment, a lot of strong friendships, a lot of finding joy in my relationships, and also a lot of people who saw me and were like, oh my God, Luis, like, we love you. Like, we accept you and we want more from you. And that, I think, for me was a turning point. And so 4 years ago was when I actually left my job at Kaiser, where I was, you know, doing really well financially and just
one of our sponsors.
Yeah, you know, and it was like the goal. That was the goal. But I think at that point I realized I wasn't happy, and there was so much going on that I took the risk of just leaving, started my own practice. And when I did that, that was, I think, the moment where I was like, if I'm going to start my own business, if I'm going to start supporting my community, if I'm going to move away from all this stuff that was not making me happy, then I need to do it my way. And I need to also do it authentically. And so that was the moment where I started to tear down a lot of these narratives that had been built for me in my life around how I was supposed to act and be seen. I went and got makeup for the first time, and I loved makeup. I remember
walking. How long ago was that? How long?
That was 4 years ago.
That's recent.
Yeah, it's not that long ago. I'm still learning. I'm still practicing. I'm still like trying to like figure out, you know, what goes with me, what doesn't. And
what was the first makeup?
Gosh, so the first thing, I remember wanting lipstick. I remember seeing so many women, and women have always played a big role in my life. They've always have been the ones that supported me, the ones that have nurtured me, the ones that have held space for me. And so for me, like, it wasn't so much like wanting to be a woman or be feminine. It was really about finding my own version of beauty and loving that they had, women had all of these tools to do it. Like I would always think of moments where I'd go into clothing stores and I'd see men and women's clothing, and I'd look at the men's clothing and be like, "Ugh, my God." And I look at
like boring.
and I look at the women's clothing and be like, "Oh my gosh, I want that, that, that." And so there were so many moments like that. And with makeup, it was always lipstick. So I remember waking up one day and deciding, you know what? I'm just not going to care anymore. And I grew up being told that the femininity was not a good thing for men, that it wasn't appropriate. And so I had a lot of work that I had to do myself.
I think many of us grew up with that.
Yeah.
And now, thanks to social media and all these movements, don't you feel more empowered?
Oh, of course. Yeah, there's definitely a lot more. I mean, at that point, even 4 years ago, there was still so much that I think was holding me back. And so especially fear, right? Because that's usually what keeps us is fear, right? Are we going to be accepted? Are we going to be loved? Are people going to value what we have to offer? And so I had to really work through all of that and not get rid of fear, but accept that it was part of the process and that I had to be brave, because there was no way for me to be brave without being afraid. And so I pushed through. I remember asking my partner, like, "Hey, babe, like, I really want to try makeup." And him being so supportive and be like, "Yeah, babe, let's go."
And your partner, he's so cute too. You know how to pick him. He's científico.
Thank you. And we met at a time too, I think, when I was still trying to figure out who I was. We've been together now 15 years this month.
Yes, and every time I see you with him, he's carrying your luggage, your purse. He's like, se mira enamorado. He goes with you everywhere. And I noticed since I met you that he's been climbing it up too. Give me 5. You're good.
But you know what? That's what I'm saying. I think it was that support, right? Because even in that moment when I said to him, I want to start wearing makeup, he went with me to the MAC store, which was I had always gone in, but I had never asked questions, or always with a girlfriend, like, let's go get you stuff. So I went in there and he was helping me try on the lipsticks, and he was telling me, "Oh, I don't like that color. Oh yeah, I like that color." I left with like 10 different shades of my first lipstick pack, and the girls at the MAC store were so nice that I had so much fear that they were gonna look at me weird, or like almost like give me, like a stare, not realizing how queer people, even in makeup, we thrive.
Yeah,
some of the biggest influences are queer.
It's art.
Queer folks.
It's
It's art.
expression.
It's beautiful. And so for me, like, that was such a positive experience that I remember going back for like little things. Now I do my foundation. Now I do a little bit of blush. Now I do my lipstick. And I had to learn step by step. And I saw it as art. Like you said, it wasn't, oh my gosh, I'm trying to look a certain way or be feminine. It was, no, it's like, I wanted to make me look how I want to look. Bring joy to me, how I want to feel.
Yeah.
And so when I wear it, I feel empowered. I don't feel like I need to explain myself to anyone. I don't feel like it's for men or women. I feel like it's art. It's like I'm painting my face like a canvas, and I can do it however I want. So sometimes I go bold and I might pick like a color that,
or like a star.
Yeah. And sometimes I'm like, no, I want to feel pretty, my version of pretty. And so, all of that took time.
You did share with me an earlier conversation that we had, and I bring this up because you said you didn't feel normal.
Yeah.
And you shared with me that your parents took you to church one time.
My parents were...
And all these ladies put their hands over you.
Yeah. And this is another part of it, that the last 4 years, I spent so much time trying to make sense of everything that had really impacted me growing up. And one of those was the religious trauma that I think for a long time, I almost avoided talking about it because there was a lot of shame and guilt for me in calling it that, because I grew up in the church. I can't even think of a time in my childhood where I wasn't at church. My parents would go 2 to 3 days a week. People would come over all the time.
It's beautiful.
It's beautiful. Yeah, no, it was beautiful because I want to, and I always tell people this because I think a lot of times folks misunderstand when I talk about religion. They think that I'm against religion or that I'm anti something, whatever. And I always tell folks, no, that's not it at all, because I did learn a lot of beautiful values from my parents because of our religion. I learned to help others. I learned to, also to listen. I learned to be patient. I learned to be kind. And I even learned about how to run, my own businesses from that ethical standpoint, because they were so involved that they were always helping other people. So that was something that I remember telling myself, I want to take the things that are good and that I know are a part of who I am, like helping others, and then leave the stuff that isn't aligned with me because it's not who I am. And so, when I think of religious trauma, I always tell folks it's very complex because there were the things that were wonderful and that were about community and that were about love and that were about supporting others. And then there were the other things, the ugly side of it, where this fear and these beliefs were
The rules.
the rule. And so if you didn't fit into it, you weren't accepted. So
Well,
that was terrifying to me at that age.
what was that like for you when you told me these ladies were praying over you
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
so that you could change?
Yeah. Yeah. And
And you told me you didn't feel normal.
yeah.
I even thought.
And they never shared that with me. So this is the thing, that a lot of times when those things happened, I didn't understand it because I didn't even think there was something wrong with me. At that point I was like, that I was who I was. And so it wasn't until I was being told that that wasn't okay, that started to really like internalize into me this idea that I'm not normal. And a big part of that was some of the religious interventions that were used. I think my parents, out of fear, out of desconocimiento, out of ignorance, felt that, that was the only solution they had, was to turn to the church. And so I never heard them say it, but I also saw that I was the only one in my family from my siblings or cousins that would get that kind of attention. And oftentimes hearing the prayers started to really connect that there was something that was wrong with me, help them get on the path, help them, be a righteous man, all of these like statements that were a reminder that they were afraid of me becoming something that they didn't understand, and it wasn't even becoming, it was me being something they didn't understand.
It's like, when did you realize that not being normal is normal? Before we continue our inspiring conversation, we want to acknowledge our sponsor, New Economics for Women. New helps individuals and families improve their income, wealth, assets, social, and educational status across generations. Their focus on education, entrepreneurship, and home ownership prepares communities to thrive. Thank you, New. Now let's get back to our conversation filled with fashionista flair.
That, like I said, a lot of that took time,
What age?
Yeah, I'm going to say it happened in different ways, because at first when I started to learn about myself, it was really about my sexuality. I said, oh, I'm gay. And I thought gay was like this whole identity and this whole like, this everything. But it wasn't. Gay just means being attracted to other men. And yes, there's a very vast gay culture, but I never really felt connected to it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until later than that where I started to learn about the word queer. I started to learn about what it meant to not align to gender norms, and what genderqueer is, which is how I identify as genderqueer. And so it evolved. And so even then, it's continuing to evolve because I see my identity as fluid. So even today, like I tell myself, you know what, this is who I am. This is how I feel. This is what aligns with me. And also, there's a lot of misconceptions. There's a lot of assumptions. There's a lot of stereotypes. And there's things that I'm still working through when it comes to my own identity. And so I do see that as continuously growing and changing. And so for me, I would say probably the last 4 years, I think all of that happened at that point where I was like, you know what, like I do identify as gay, but I also know that the way I present myself, I don't align with the masculinity aspect of certain things. And it's not how I want to exist. And it didn't feel natural to me. And so moving away from that and embracing all of these other pieces, I think that's where I started to realize, I feel so empowered by my queerness, by my identity to not fit into anything, that it's unlimited. I can continue to grow and shift and change, and it's okay.
I really love your style and the way you present yourself. And I've seen you in a couple of fashion shows. I saw you at Equality Fashion where you're walking down the catwalk, and I was enamored, and I couldn't believe that I get to see non-typical standards of beauty and a variety of fashion shows now, even in our stage. And you identify as Indigi queer, as a fashion model. Yeah. And I went to your website, and you have the size, your height, your bust, your calzones, everything.
Yeah, everything else.
So you're being hired. People are looking for you to represent.
Yeah. I've been very fortunate. I have to say that I never expected it. I think when I started to do modeling and started to really fight against a lot of these oppressive narratives. It was more for me to heal, to reject these things and to say that I didn't need that. And then it started to become more than that, where people started to see me and reach out and wanted to connect. And then I started to take it more serious and doing my photo shoots and connecting with other photographers and models and designers. And it little by little, you know, it was a lot of work. I think like anything that you love and that you're passionate about, it takes time. It takes a lot of learning. It also takes a lot of mistakes. And, you know, it also is going to have a lot of ups and downs because that's just the way it is. But I think for me, the ups were always so much higher that even the moments where I got the big no's from people or I didn't get casted didn't matter too much as me because didn't matter as much to me because that wasn't what I was after. For me, it was about finding empowerment in myself. So the fact that I got on there and those auditions or that I sent in my stuff for this, that was more powerful to me because I was reminding myself, like, I don't need them to.
You didn't.
Yeah, I'm sending it in. I'm doing it. I'm walking. If they like me, if they see me, they'll take me and they'll, you know, support me and they'll hire me. If they don't, then they're not meant for me. And that's totally fine. And so the more and more that I really invested in that, the more I started to see success. You know, I've gotten flown out to San Francisco and paid to model. I've gotten paid here to model at different shows. I've helped organize even for the Queer Mercado with other designers as well, you know, and so, and I actually just finished helping consult and organize a big fashion show from a designer in San Francisco that came down to LA for the first big show. And I'm continuing with them as well to continue consulting. So, I mean, these are doors that open for me as soon as yeah, and it's a huge deal, you know, especially for me 4 years ago thinking, you know what, like people might not take me serious. I'm just going to do it because I love it. And then now seeing myself like busy all the time.
You're a brand.
And, yeah.
And you even have a media production company.
I do. Yeah, I've been working on that.
And you're doing speaking and modeling and you're collaborating with fashion. Even with Señora Calzones, you guys are working together. Even with DH, you're like, are you wearing DH?
I am, yeah. The earrings, the ring, yeah.
So what is important here is that in looking at your entire trajectory is that you slowly but surely started putting yourself out there and being your authentic self and not worrying about all the haters. Because you told me you started getting some hate.
Oh, my God.
You started brushing it off.
Instantly, you know, and the thing, honestly, Diana, that I was thinking about is that I got so used to having haters because that was what it felt like. And
how do you break it?
Well, you know what, let me say this because as much as I love my family and my parents and I tell people multiple things can exist, there's a lot of hate from them around who I was. So, you know, that taught me to also hate parts of myself that I spent so many years healing and moving into love. And middle school, like even high school, I mean, all of that, there were always people that were judgmental and critical. So I think a part of me already felt acquainted with that. Like, I know this. I already know what that feels like. That the scarier part was not feeling it and thinking I can actually be loved and seen. And so it wasn't so much me trying to focus on the haters. Like, I already knew what they were like. They're going to hate. I mean, that's just the reality. We have people who are going to see us, and it can be because they're jealous. It can be because they're wounded. It can be because they just really hate us for whatever reason. We can't control that. Yeah. And so for me, what I had to realize was that it wasn't the focus on having people not hate me. It was the focus on the people that loved me and how to continue growing through that. So that's how I brushed it off. That I'm not competing with anyone. I'm not. I have no reason to compete with people. I'm doing my own thing. I am my own person. I have my own story. And so that's another big thing that I moved away from is the scarcity mentality. You know, that mentality that I need to compete or that there's only little opportunities for all of us. It's like, no, the whole goal is for us to do this as a community and elevate all of ourselves. And so for me, that's why that I've had to do a lot of work to move away from because it's natural. We all get celosos. We all start to like judge. I mean, it's default, right? Because we've been raised in a world where that is a normalized thing. But it is work to not do that. And so for me, as soon as I think something about someone, I start to remind myself, you know what? I'm happy for them. I'm glad that they're shining, that they're doing their thing. What do I have to do today? Like, what is shining today? You know, like instead of focusing on other people's business, like I'm like, what do I have to do today? And I've realized that what has helped me brush off the haters the most is focusing on joy for others. Because when you have joy for others, you don't sit there in resentment and anger and hate. You sit there in like almost this abundance of like great for them, and you attract that energy.
Yeah.
You put that energy out. And so that's why I like to remind myself that it's not a competition, because there is no other person that is like me.
There's only one.
There you go. There's only one of us. Yeah. And I have met other queer folks that are doing similar work who are such wonderful people, such caring and loving, and share very similar stories. And that makes me happy to know that I'm not alone. I don't want to be the only one like breaking down barriers, or like, I get tired too.
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of responsibility, like Star Wars.
My gosh, imagine, being the only one trying to save the universe. I'm like, I need a team. I need people to collaborate. You were talking about Señora Canzones and Dose of Home. I mean, these are all folks that have seen me, that we've worked together, we've supported one another, you and I as well, other folks, because for me, it's not about competition. It's not about, being better than other people. It's about how do we better our communities? How do we move forward? And how do we heal? Because I do believe that love is not just individual, it's through community and through others. And we learn to love ourselves through others and on our own. And so for me, it's been a combination of those.
And you know what, I want to point out that that's why I wanted to invite you, because your visibility and the way you put yourself out there is deeply inspiring.
Yeah.
And, it's you've attracted a lot of the goddesses and vendors from the queer mercado. And I see a lot of us kind of doing and mimicking what you're doing, your fashion, how you put yourself out there and being like fun, fabulous, ridiculous. I love that, right? I like to do that. And showing up with the crown. Everywhere I turn, I'm at a pop-up. I turn and you're there. I'm like, what are you doing here? I came to talk. What are you doing here? They invited me to say some words. I'm doing it there. I am so impressed with your fashion, with your support, with your collabs, with your efforts, with your work ethic. And that's why it's important. Another one of the reasons why it was important to have you here, because a lot of the vendor community that is watching and listening sometimes gets, fearful, or they have doubt, or, they don't know how to put themselves out there or build their brands. And you're doing it. And I see it because of your work ethic. But you heard me talk about this in the past, about the Webona days, where there are days, and I've seen your Webona days and when you put on your social media, but when it doesn't mean that you're being lazy or that you're practicing self-care. Just those days where you feel like a fraud, where you feel like, what am I doing here, right? We all feel that. It's common. Even the most powerful leaders feel them. Those days where like, why did I do this? Like, what's the point? Why am I going? Why am I paying to get this exposure? Those are Webona days.
Yeah.
What do you do to get through those Webona days?
You know what? I will say that for me, it has become almost a ritual, knowing that I will go through those days, because like you said, we all go through it. Everyone goes through it, because we're human. I don't care if you tell me the most confident, they have days like that too, because we live in a world, like I said, that demands certain things that are not realistic. And so we're going to like almost go down on ourselves sometimes. And a lot of times I've learned that it's not even me. It's voices from all these other places, that people that are like trying to remind me of something. And so I like to make it a ritual where I will let it be there. I don't try to fight it. I don't use toxic positivity. I don't tell myself, oh my gosh, sunshine and rainbows. No, I tell myself, you know what? Like, it hurts. I'll cry. I love to cry. I used to be told que era un chillón and not to cry. I let myself cry now. I love crying because I know it's a release. I know it's natural, and I know that it's there. So I allow it to be out. I don't do anything. And I will honestly, like, I think before tenía tanto like guilt in like rescheduling or shifting my schedule. But on those days where I know that I'm not going to show up 100%, I'll tell people, I'll say, you know what, if we can reschedule, and I try to be as polite as possible. And if it works out, we can do it. And if not, then, there's nothing I can do about it. But I try to focus on what I need to do for myself. So beyond even self-care, because I think self-care, sometimes we confuse it with like, the bubble bath, the binge movie night kind of thing, which is great.
Mascarilla.
And those are excellent. But I think
those are self-care days.
Yeah, those are self-care. I think for me, really thinking about the deeper stuff that is really around holding space for ourselves that we don't often do. And so that's why I say it's a ritual, because it's almost like this day where I'm not thinking about anyone else. I'm thinking about myself. I'm thinking about my own journey. I'm thinking about the wounds coming up that are showing. I'm thinking about loving myself and being gentle and kind and soft to myself. I'll have my tea. I'll get my favorite thing for lunch. I'll sit there and listen to music and sing along to it. I'll lay in my bed. I'll sleep. I'll take naps. It's just so many different things that I think are a reminder for me that I'm also human and that I need to recharge and that my emotions are valid and that all of these feelings coming up, I may not like them, I may not want them, but they're a part of who I am and I don't have to act on them. I just have to allow them to be there. And so that ritual for me has worked. I get myself some candles sometimes. I do stuff like meditation.
You are making some candles too.
I have my own candle line. I do a lot of things like that, play with my dogs, stuff that really grounds me.
With your partner?
Yeah. Hang out with my partner. So, no, honestly, sometimes that too. Like, we don't get time to sit down and talk because we're so busy the whole week that I'll say, you know what, I just need you to like be here with me, and he'll hold me. I'm a big baby. And not to say that in a mean way because I think we need it too, but I like to be held. And so I know when I need it, I'll let him know. I'll say, I just really want to be held. And so we'll lay in bed. He'll hold me. I'll cry. Doesn't say anything. Doesn't need to say anything to me. And then when it's all gone, I just give myself time and he'll let me know, you can take your nap. And when you get up, we can eat something. And so even that, right, communicating with the people we love, what we need has helped me. And so those days are about me. And so I do encourage, the goddesses and folks that are out there who go through these days to not feel like they need to get rid of these days because they're a part of our journey. They're a part of being alive, but instead to learn how to be embracing of it, to learn how to accept it as part of them. And it doesn't have to be a part we hate. It can be a part that maybe needs more love, and it's okay for us to be soft.
So these are all the things that you do in order to help you show up fabulously, show up representing, show up empowering your brand and your business. And thank you so much for being so vulnerable and for sharing about your brand and your business and your journey and your family, because a lot of us can learn, us as mothers, as counselors, as business women, as partners. We have a lot to learn from you. Thank you. You're so valuable. And you need to continue moving forward and empowering all of us. Where can our community find you? Please share your handles, your platforms.
I'm everywhere, but I have my at this point I have my website, which is www.luis-cornejo.com, and all my stuff is on there. My modeling photos, my catwalking samples. If you do
you have my site. You guys gotta log onto the site. And also look at the Instagram. What's the Instagram?
Yeah, my Instagram. Oh, so on my website now, I'm launching my newsletter this month because I want to start to send out tips and support for people to feel inspired, motivated, and encouraged.
I'll sign up today.
Sign up. Yeah, so I'm having that. That's on the website too, and I've been sharing it on Instagram. My Instagram is at Luis _the THEE and then _LMFT. So Luis _the. Like Megan Thee Stallion, and then LMFT, and that's where I share all my updates. I post events that I'm going to attend, and so that's probably the best way for people to connect with me. That on my website.
So you heard it here from Luis Cornejo, family therapist, sex therapist, brand ambassador, Indigi model, everything. Fashionista Activista. Thank you so much for joining us. I can't wait for you to meet Luis or see Luis's work that he's doing with the Queer Mercado. And we'll see you soon in the next one. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Con todo mi corazón, we want to thank New Economics for Women, SoCal Gas, and Kaiser Permanente. And to you, our beautiful listeners, for being the heartbeat of Fashionista Activista. Vamos adelante with more stories, more laughter, and moments of inspiration that knit our communities ever so close. Make sure to subscribe and follow us on social media. Hasta la próxima, goddesses.